6.2 continued, page 2 of the notes, moving on to another exponent rule, again where we're going to look at the definition, what it looks like written out, and then where that rule came from. That way you can choose to memorize the rule, but have the understanding of it so you can recreate it in case you forget or blank, which we all have that happen to us every once in a while. Simplify each expression using the products to power rule. Similar to the power to power rule, but this time there's things being multiplied inside and then raised to an exponent. But by definition, we can still recreate what's happening here. How do we do this? The question really is, well, we would know what to do if it was x to the 11th raised to the 5th. We know that's x to the 11th times itself 5 times like we did on the previous page. And we end up multiplying the exponents. 5 times 11 is 55. But what happens with this 2, and especially this negative out front? Again, if it was a to the 5th, it would be a times a times a times a times a times a times itself 5 times. So by definition, it's whatever's inside this parenthesis times itself 5 times. So it'd be negative 2x to the 11th times another negative 2x to the 11th times another negative 2x to the 11th times another one times a fifth one, negative 2x to the 11th times itself 5 times. And using our knowledge from Math 60, because this is all multiplication, negative 2 times x to the 11th times negative 2 times x, all this is multiplication. This is all commutative and associative. I can rearrange this to put things together. So I can rearrange all the negative 2's can be multiplied together out here without changing the value of what we're looking at. And all the x to the 11ths can be put in the back and rearranged and multiplied together in their own group. And so then what we're looking at here is really, by definition, this is really negative 2, the whole thing to the 5th, and this is x to the 11th, the whole thing to the 5th. Meaning we can use the definition to spread this out, use our algebra skills, our knowledge of the properties, commutative and associative, to rearrange it, and then use definition of exponents again to simplify it. Negative 2 to the 5th, x to the 11th to the 5th. And now we see the rule is that when you have a product, something being multiplied, raised to a power, you can apply that exponent to each piece. So negative 2 gets raised to the 5th, and x to the 11th gets raised to the 5th. Notice that the negative is involved here. If we'd taken this rearranging even further, we could say that every one of these negative 2's is negative 1 times positive 2, and we could have pulled all the negative 1's out, and the negative 1 itself would have been raised to the 5th. And that would convince you that this would be a negative 1. Which, by the way, the answer for this is negative 2 to the 5th is going to be a negative 32, because the negative gets multiplied by itself 5 times. That odd number creates the negative. 2 gets multiplied by itself 5 times. 2 to the 5th power is 32. X to the 11th to the 5th, using the power to power rule from earlier, you multiply those. You can see it written out here. You've got 11, another 11, another 11, another 11, another 11. We could stretch this all out, use several pages here, and we would end up with 5 groups of 11, which is x to the 55, or to the 55th power. So the rule says that we would distribute that exponent, and by the rule it would be negative 2 to the 5th times x to the 11th to the 5th, and that of course would give you the negative 32 x to the 55th. Okay? So the rule is a way to memorize and eliminate having to write out the definition, but you can always use the definition if you're confused by the rule. And if you know that you tend to mix these rules up and you always have to wonder which one, you have to get to a point where you aren't wondering anymore. You see it and it's second nature which rule to apply and what to do. You almost don't even have to think of the rule. It just starts to come naturally to you because you've done it so many times. How do you get there? A surefire way to get there is to write out the definition and the steps every time till it starts to become ingrained. It just makes sense to you. You've got the steps memorized, you're using it correctly, and you're getting correct answers. And that's when you're going to be able to start really being confident as you approach a test that you won't blank out on those rules. So take the time to write that out. Okay, so watch for those negatives. And then we've got one without negatives here for you to try. So pause the video once you've got this copied and you feel like you've highlighted any questions you need to bring to class, and then try number 20 down here. And when you come back, you can see the answer. And you should get 36x to the 6th when you do number 20, which is a product raised to a power.